Hello and welcome to the latest episode of the Good Dram Show with me, Chris Goodrum. Right, okay, so what are we up to today? Right, thought it's about time we took a look at blended whiskey. I don't think I've done an episode of the show on a blended whiskey, so it's probably about time we did one. And fortunately enough, I was sent samples of the Antiquary range, which is the blended malt produced by J.W. Hardy, who are owned by the Tomatin Distillery. And I thought, yeah, it'd be an interesting thing to look at, because a lot of people kind of turn their noses up at blends and get a bit sniffy about single malts being the best thing since sliced bread, yada yada yada, which is, in my opinion, unfounded. The whole point of a blended whiskey is to create something that doesn't exist within nature. So that the whole point of it is to take generally speaking, a number of different malts and grain whiskies, vat them together to create something new, something slightly different. Obviously, the younger or the least expensive grain blended whiskies tend to have a high proportion of grain, obviously, because it's the cheapest component, and it will be fairly young, and some of them can be a bit spirity, a bit hard work, and on the other hand, they can be sort of downright sort of awful, to be honest with you. Certainly, if you're after sort of cheap whiskey to go for a cheap blend, then some of that whiskey ain't going to be the best quality stuff, is it now? Obviously, some of the larger brands tend to sort of try and be a little bit more choice in their selections, but I mean, there's always going to be batch variations. I mean, Johnny Walker or Johnny Walker Black, for example, is a one of those whiskies that I've tasted on several occasions, and each time it's always tasted different. Or sometimes it's been really very very good, other times it's been absolutely awful. So when you're producing sort of like a huge amount of a particular bottling, there's always going to be the chance that some rogue casks and stuff like that are going to creep in. But anyway, I'm kind of waffling a little bit. So anyway, so what we're going to do is we're going to have a look at the Antiquary range, and well, let's introduce the lineup then. Right, okay, so you have to excuse the labels that have been stuck on, but they're only samples after all. We'll kick off with what's the no age statement bottling called the Finest. It's bottled at 40% ABV, and it's like a lot of relatively inexpensive blends. There is a high proportion of grain. I believe it is 70% grain and 30% malt. Now, that's all well and good. You think, well, it's just going to be a bit grainy and what have you, and it could well be. But what you would hope that the malt is full of character and will come through and give some balance to that. This is the 12-year-old. Again, this is bottled at 40%. Obviously, the malt and the grain that comprises this, which I think is closer to 50-50, is a minimum of 12 years old. And finally, we have the 21-year-old bottled at 43%. Now, you can basically, when you put a blended whiskey together, you blend in whatever you like at the end of the day, whiskey wise. Sometimes it's better to go with maybe one or two, but other times you want a bit more of a broader spectrum. So although this is not an exhaustive list of what they used, I believe, obviously being owned by Tomatin features quite highly in the array of malts they use. I also believe they use Cragganmore, Royal Lochnagar, Klein Elish, Glenkinchie, Bamore, and I believe a little bit of Ardbeg as well. So, along with grain from both Cameron Bridge and Port Dundas. So, what you're looking for is all the elements. You're looking for a bit of sort of Speyside fruit, a bit of Highland robustness or granitiness, a little bit of sort of sweetness, I guess, from the lowland component, and a little bit of smokiness from the Isle component. So anyway, let's start with the finest then, shall we? Right, okay, so on to the finest. Like I was saying, predominantly grain, 70% of it being grain, 30% malt. Let's see what the nose gives us. Yes, well, obviously the grain is quite predominant. I mean, you would expect it to be. It's got that lovely, sweet, grainy character to it, but that small amount of malt is actually sort of punching way above its weight. And this is one of the reasons why I rate the Antiquary range, is that the blend is just exceptionally good. It's got a little bit of white flowers, a little bit of perfume, apricots, a little bit of honey, a little bit of spice. And the honey sort of is developing, and I'm guessing it's probably coming from the tomatin, I would imagine. Although certainly you get Clynelish can be quite honeyed. There's a little bit of smoke, not a lot, just a smidge. And I mean, at the end of the day, the Isle malt components are probably going to be the most expensive malts that go into it. So again, it probably goes to sort of show that to create something at this kind of price point, you're going to obviously have to be sort of sparing with the more expensive components. So a little bit, just a smidge of smoke. But like I said, it's predominantly grain, but it's clean, and it's fresh, but it's not too young. It's not too spirity. It's not harsh. The grain. It's got some nice. It's got a nice roundness of character. Palate. Crisp, again, predominantly grainy. You could argue it's a little bit on the short side, but at its core it's got a nice maltiness, a nice dense fruit character, apricot again, a bit of honey, little bit of oak character. I don't think they're using an awful lot of first fill bourbon in this, to be honest with you, but kind of grain comes first and finishes on the grain notes. But that's a lovely malt, a lovely blend. Sorry, it's easy going. It's easy to drink. It's a little bit of just on the right at the very end, a little bit of kind of Bamori Parma Violet note, a little bit of smoke. I think all round a really enjoyable blend, and again not particularly expensive. Right, on to the 12-year-old now, where the finest I think retails in, off the top of my head, around about the sort of £24 to £26 mark. This is in the range of most 10-year-old sort of single malts. It's in the sort of 32 to sort of 36 kind of pound mark, which is where you expect to find most 10-year-old single malts, the odd 12-year-old single malt as well. So again, it's kind of priced with the market. So let's see what the nose gives us on this. Oh, yes, now you can get more of the Isla now. It's got that lightly phenolic, light peat, burnt wood, some rich Bamori kind of fruit, a little bit of Parma Violet. Beneath that, there's some definite honey, some rich fruit, a little bit of granitiness, light herbal, a little bit of herbalness as well. A touch of coffee. Again, quite malty. Like I was saying, I'm pretty certain this is 50% malt, 50% grain, and it's really harmonious, really well put together. You can feel the grain at the edges sort of like just nipping a little bit, but not sort of overwhelming it. It's got a nice perfume to it. Again, it's like I said, dense, malty, full. I mean, again, that will probably be in large proportion of the tomatin, which can be like that. That is lovely. That is a very, very nice blend. Palate. That's smooth. The one criticism I will give it is that there's quite a lot of natural caramel, and it does slightly sort of, certainly in the beginning of the palate, it certainly dampens things down a little bit. But it's got, again, it's got some nice depth, some fruit, some rich fruit, a little bit of smoke, a little bit of burnt wood, a little bit of tar. Again, finishing more heavily on the grainy notes with that sort of spicy nip, white fruit. Again, some lovely honeyed notes, and I think if there was less of the caramel, which, like I'm saying, I don't believe is added caramel. I think that's obviously natural caramel, which is obviously derived from the oak. A little bit less of that, a little bit more vibrancy, and you know, I would be saying that is stunning. As it is, I think it's very good, and I would certainly recommend that particular blend. So yeah, enjoyable. Right, okay, so, and finally the 21-year-old. Now the 21-year-old is obviously a little bit more expensive than the 12-year-old. Retails somewhere in the mid-70s. So you know, again, I think for a 21-year-old, that's not a bad price. So let's see what the nose gives us. Oh, now that is nice. That is beautiful. Getting lots of mature Bamor, and sort of dusty Parma violets, dusty oak, dusty peat. Some lovely mature honey, wood spices, touch of licorice, coffee. But it's got a nice scent to it as well. That sort of little, lightly floral. Again, quite granity, quite hard in actual fact. Once you get past the sort of like the Isla component, it's got very Highland style, which again I suppose is not surprising. Again, some soft honey, deliciously rich and wonderfully soft. I mean, you hardly can perceive the grain. The grain is definitely there. Again, just at the edges, it gives that a slight grainy sweetness to it. And that's the thing about blended whiskies. Grain, you know, has a character all of its own, and young grain, or sort of like, which is in my opinion up to about 21 years old, that's still pretty young as far as grain whiskey goes, has a sort of vibrancy, a sort of like a spiciness, an edge, and it's just got something that malt whiskey doesn't have, you know. And by adding the two together, you can create something different. I mean, obviously, when you've got sort of grain of a definite, you know, 30, 40 years old, it can become, yeah, absolutely sublime. And you know, some of the, you know, older blends that I've tasted have been, you know, by far and away on a par with a single malt of the same sort of age, and this is fantastic. It's just mature, mellow, really well put together. Yeah, just damn good. Palate. it's a real coal dust finish, that is. It's full, it's broad, it's juicy, it's malty. Finish is quite dry with more of the Highland sort of granite. A little bit of tannin, a lot of smoke, coal smoke, with that sort of, you know, gritty licorice. Wow, that is good. That's a lovely malt, a lovely blend. Again, sort of like, you know, it has a little bit of that crisp grain coming through on the finish, which kind of cleanses up the palate. But that's full, that's malty, that's a real mouthful. That is very, very good. Right, okay, so let's sum this little tasting up then. I think sort of all round, I think the Antiquary range is pretty impressive. The 12-year-old, the finest, no age statement. It's a lovely blend. It's got, you know, I think the malt component certainly punches above its weight. It's got a lovely crispness. It's got some complexity, and yeah, I think for the money, I mean, you could buy a single malt for that kind of money, and you know, it wouldn't be half as good in my opinion. So yeah, I think the finest is very, very good. 12-year-old, okay, minor quibble in that it's a little flattened by the caramel, certainly initially on the palate, but it certainly comes into its own. It's got some lovely complexity. You're getting elements from the Isla malts, you're getting elements from the Highland, you're getting elements from the Spey, and you're certainly getting some grain character. So I think sort of all round a really nicely well put together blend. Again, you know, not overly expensive, you know, about the sort of price you would expect to pay for a 10-year-old or 12-year-old single malt. So and it certainly has, you know, plenty of complexity. Maybe if it didn't quite have so much of that dampening caramel to it, it might be even better. But I think sort of, you know, as it stands, I think that's really quite impressive. And the 21-year-old, well, I think the 21-year-old is again, you know, a lovely blend. Lots of maturity. It has that kind of dusty Bamor character to it. That sort of dusty oak, the dusty violets, the dusty peat. You know, that just, you know, you taste old Bamor and it just comes across like that. You know, pretty dusty. You know, so and again, you know, lovely complexity. You're getting the elements from, you know, flavours and aromas from all the parts of the blend, you know, and it's still got a little bit of crispness from the grain whiskey component. So yeah, I think as a range of blended range, I think the Antiquary is really very, very good. So yeah, I guess that's pretty much about it for this afternoon. I hope you enjoyed this episode of the show, and hopefully it will, you know, change your opinions with regards to blended whiskey in general, and hopefully you'll give maybe the Antiquary, one of the bottlings of the Antiquary, a try and see what you think, because I think they're definitely worth it. So anyway, all that's left to say is good dramming and good afternoon.